August 1945. Pingfang burns behind us like a dying sun. The officers call it sanitizing the facility, but we all know what it really is. Erasure. An entire world of secrets collapsing into smoke. I was told once that science is the pursuit of truth. Yet here we are, feeding truth into the fire, page by page, name by name. Orders are shouted, papers vanish, and somewhere beyond the walls, the last cries of those we called logs are being silenced forever. I should have thrown everything into the flames. That is what loyalty demands. That is what survival requires. But my hands hesitated. Among the documents, cold, clinical, written in my own unforgiving script, I found the one thing I could not burn: the faces behind the numbers. The human weight of every line I ever wrote. So I hid the notebook. A single, trembling act against the tide of obedience. The others will say none of this ever happened. History will be rewritten by those who live long enough to tell it. But truth has a way of surviving in shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to turn on the light. If anyone ever finds what I left behind, know this: we were not heroes. We were not scientists. We were instruments of destruction, taught to call it duty, trained to call it progress. And now the fire tries to wash us clean. But I can still feel the smoke clinging to my skin. For years, I thought I understood my country's history. Timelines, treaties, battles. Facts neatly arranged in textbooks, curated to feel complete. Yet somehow, there were always gaps. Blank spaces where uncomfortable truths should have been. When I entered graduate school, I wanted to study memory, how nations remember, and what they choose to forget. But I didn't expect the silence to feel so deliberate. Unit 731. The first time I saw the name, it was buried in a footnote. Small enough to ignore, quiet enough to pretend it meant nothing. My professor warned me that some archives stay locked not because they are empty, but because opening them forces us to confront who we were, and who we still are. At home, it was worse. My father's voice tightened the moment I asked about Manchuria. He said our family had no connection to those things, and that some doors should stay closed. But lies and omissions feel different when they come from someone you love. They echo, so I started reading between the lines. I searched through old photos, letters no one had touched in decades, shadows that never quite faded. And somewhere along the way, curiosity turned into unease, unease into suspicion, suspicion into something heavier. There is a story in my family, one that no one has ever told me, a silence inherited like a fragile heirloom. If I am to write a thesis about memory, I must start with our own, even if it leads me into the very darkness my father refuses to see. When the letter arrived, I thought it was an honor. Selected for advanced medical service in Manchuria. Those words shimmered with promise, recognition, purpose, the chance to serve the empire with my skills. My professors congratulated me. My parents bowed their heads with pride. And I believed every glowing word. They called it the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Unit. A noble name, a comforting one. It sounded like healing, like progress, like everything I imagined medicine could be. No one mentioned secrecy. No one mentioned soldiers with cold eyes escorting us onto the train. No one mentioned the signatures required to ensure we never speak about our work again. We were told we were the spearhead of Japan's scientific future, that disease was the real enemy, that our research would save countless lives. Patriotism has a way of making even the vaguest truths feel righteous. On the journey north, a senior doctor leaned toward me and whispered that Manchuria was a place where ordinary rules do not apply. He said it like a promise, not a warning. I laughed politely, pretending I understood. In truth, I felt a ripple of unease, small, quickly dismissed. But pride is a powerful blindfold, and ambition, even more so. When the compound finally came into view, white walls, immaculate, humming with activity, I told myself I was stepping into the future of medical science. I did not yet know that behind those clean walls, we would be asked to trade compassion for obedience and curiosity for silence. Back then, I still believed I was going to save people. Inside the compound, everything smelled of disinfectant and metal. Clean corridors, white coats, polished instruments arranged with surgical precision. If someone had walked in without knowing, they might have mistaken it for a modern hospital. Clinical, efficient, dedicated to science. But beneath that immaculate surface was something colder. The first time I heard the prisoners being called Maruta, logs, I thought it was a joke, some crude barracks humor. It wasn't. It was policy. An official vocabulary designed to strip away personhood, to make the unthinkable feel routine. Language is a surgeon's first cut. It removes what the conscience cannot bear. Each day followed the same rhythm. Morning briefings, research assignments, controlled environments. Observations documented with meticulous detail. We never used the words patients or subjects, only materials. A simple shift in terminology, but enough to dull the moral edges. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself that every nation at war makes sacrifices, but the human eye is harder to silence than the human mind. There was one man, a teacher I later learned, who looked at me without fear or hatred, only clarity, as if he saw through the uniform, through the mask of science, all the way to the cowardice beneath. I held his gaze for a heartbeat too long, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what we were doing. The others dismissed any discomfort. Progress always demands a cost, Dr. Sato would say, as if repeating a mantra. If we don't do this, our enemies will. Japan's future depends on our results. Duty has many disguises, and we wore them all. So I wrote my reports, filled my charts, followed orders. But late at night, when the corridors emptied and the compound fell silent, I would read the day's notes and feel something tightening in my chest. Numbers, symptoms, outcomes, patterns that were not merely data, but echoes of lives being unmade. And though I told no one, not even myself, I knew the truth. We were not studying disease. We were manufacturing it. We were not purifying water. We were poisoning the well of our own humanity. And every day, the line between healer and destroyer blurred, until I could no longer see where it had been. There is a moment in every man's life when the world stops pretending. Mine came on a morning that looked like all the others. Gray sky, cold air, the familiar weight of a clipboard in my hand. Routine can make monsters feel ordinary. That was the greatest lie of Unit 731. Dr. Sato greeted me with a smile sharper than any scalpel. "Congratulations," he said. "Today, you'll be leading the procedure." Promotion, he called it. Recognition of my scientific promise. But the word procedure rang hollow. It had for months. Then I saw him, the teacher. The man whose calm eyes had followed me through every corridor of my conscience. He stood there, steady, as if bracing himself against a storm he had already endured 100 times. In that instant, the world narrowed to a single point, his face, and my name written across the assignment sheet. I told myself I had no choice, that refusing would change nothing, that orders were orders, and survival required obedience. But the truth is simpler, uglier. I was afraid of punishment, afraid of shame, afraid of being the lone voice against an empire of silence. Sato watched me, waiting, confident I would comply. He always knew which men would follow the script, and I did. Not because I believed in the work, but because I had spent too long pretending I had no power, until that lie became easier than the truth. The moment I stepped forward, something inside me fractured. A quiet breaking, like a thin sheet of ice giving way beneath a careless boot. You don't hear the sound at first, but once you do, you realize the crack has always been there. Later, in the privacy of my quarters, I opened my notebook. Not the official ledger, the hidden one. The one where I wrote not results, but remorse. That night, my handwriting shook. Each sentence felt like an admission, each word a betrayal, not of the army, but of the lie that had kept me obedient. I recorded his name.
All gone.
I recorded my guilt.
Now.
I recorded the
Yes,
truth no
completely
one else
gone.
would dare speak aloud. I told myself that writing it down was an act of courage. But courage is a curious thing. It does not erase what has been done. It only illuminates the darkness you tried so hard not to see. And once the darkness is visible, you can never again pretend you are blind. In the final weeks of the war, the air itself seemed to tremble. Rumors moved faster than orders. The empire was shrinking, collapsing, dying in pieces. And every whisper brought the same conclusion. The Soviets were coming, and they were close. Fear changes the shape of a place. Unit 731, once so precise, so arrogant in its control, began to rot from the inside. Doors slammed, papers disappeared, officers barked contradictions. Men who once lectured us on scientific discipline now trembled like schoolboys caught in a lie too large to bury. Then the final order arrived. A single sentence, delivered without ceremony. Destroy everything, leave no trace. The word everything was not metaphor. We all understood what it meant, even those who pretended not to. Records, equipment, evidence, and the people whose existence the unit had always denied. I watched the others move with frantic purpose, performing erasure as if it were just another experiment. Some did it with numb efficiency, others with a satisfaction I still cannot understand. I stood among them, trapped between the man I had been and the man I feared I had become. I tried, God knows I tried, to save at least one life. The teacher was still there, weakened but unbroken. For a moment, I believed I could slip him past the guards, hide him, do something, anything that might balance the scales I had so carelessly tipped. But the machine devours even its smallest gears. By the time I reached him, the decision had already been made for me. There are sounds a man carries forever. I will not name them. But they followed me long after the compound fell silent. When the fires began, I knew I was witnessing not just the destruction of evidence, but the burning of our own humanity. Yet even then, cowardice guided my steps. I hid my notebook, my one fragile rebellion, inside a crack in the wall, praying that someday someone braver than I would find it. And when the Soviets finally breached the perimeter, I ran. Not toward justice, not toward redemption, just away. From the smoke, from the screams, from the version of myself I could no longer bear to face.
Served his country.
The Americans questioned us later. They wanted data, not truth. And so the lie was completed. Immunity bought with silence. Guilt dissolved in the acid of political convenience. I returned to Japan with clean hands and a soiled soul. People welcomed me as a doctor, a healer. No one asked about the flames behind me. But at night, when the world sleeps and the past grows loud, I remember this. The unit did not collapse in 1945. It collapsed the moment we chose obedience over mercy. The fire was only the final punctuation. For most of my life, My grandfather existed only in photographs. A gentle smile, a doctor's coat, a man spoken of with quiet reverence. No one ever mentioned Manchuria. No one ever spoke his name alongside the word unit. Silence can be inherited, passed down like a family heirloom no one wants to claim. When I began searching through his belongings, I wasn't expecting answers. I was expecting the same polite emptiness my father offered whenever I asked. "Your grandfather served his country," he would say, as if that explained everything. But truth has a peculiar way of lingering in forgotten corners. The notebook appeared almost by accident, buried beneath medals, certificates, letters yellowed with time. A faint smell of dust and age rose as I opened it, and for a moment, I felt as if I were trespassing into someone else's confession. The early pages looked harmless enough. Technical notes, medical observations, the handwriting precise and disciplined. But as I read on, the tone shifted. Clinical language gave way to something fractured, trembling. Numbers turned into names, data into remorse, observations into confessions, written in a hand that seemed to falter with every line. My grandfather had recorded everything he could not say aloud. My father found me reading it. His face changed. Fear, shame, denial, all flickering in an instant. He said the past was complicated, that our family had suffered too, that digging into old wounds only created new ones. But the truth is not a wound. The truth is a mirror.
These policies have had a devastating
and sometimes
impact
what we
on the
fear
community,
most is
and the
recognizing
numbers are
ourselves
still
in its
rising.
reflection. That night, as I turned the fragile pages, I felt something shift inside me. The man in those photographs, the gentle doctor, was not a lie, but not the whole story either. I had always believed history was shaped by nations, but here it was, bound in leather, shaped by one man's guilt, hidden by one family's silence, waiting decades for someone willing to open it. And as I closed the notebook, one thought echoed clearly. If I choose silence now, the fire that swallowed Unit 731 will claim him all over again. I used to think history was something written in books, fixed, distant, curated by people wiser than me. But now I understand. History is a choice between remembering and forgetting, between facing the past and burying it beneath convenience. When I presented my research, the room felt colder than I expected. Some listened with quiet grief, some with disbelief, and a few with anger, not at the crimes, but at the fact they were spoken aloud. Why bring this up now? Why shame your own country? Some things should stay in the dark. Their voices tried to sway me, tried to push me back into the silence that had swallowed my family for generations. But then, after the lecture, a woman approached me. Her voice shook as she said her grandfather vanished near Harbin in 1942. She never knew what happened to him, only that he never came home. She held my hand and whispered, "Thank you." Someone had to say their names. In that moment, I realized my grandfather's notebook was not just a record of guilt. It was an invitation, a fragile bridge between what happened and what must never happen again. Remembering does not break a nation. Forgetting does. The past is not an enemy to defeat, but a teacher we cannot ignore. And if truth casts a long shadow, then at least it is honest. At least it shows us where the light should be. As I scanned the notebook's final page, I wondered what my grandfather hoped for when he hid it. Forgiveness? Redemption? Or simply the chance that someone, anyone, might one day acknowledge the humanity he had tried, too late, to reclaim? I don't know. But I do know this. Atrocities do not disappear because we look away. They disappear when we pretend no one should remember. And I refuse to let silence write the final chapter. Not for my grandfather, not for his victims, not for the truth that survived a fire long before I was born. History waits for someone willing to speak. Today, that someone is me.